All right, let's start talking about the navigation on this domain. And remember that search is not just about robots and getting better rankings and so forth, but about better user experience on your website. And navigation is how visitors will search for assets on your website internally. And they're also an important crawl pathway for your search engine spider. So, navigation pretty much couldn't be any more important. You got to have intuitive navigation for your site visitors, and you need to have clear internal cross-linking in order for the search engine spiders to be able to access the different parts of your site that you want it to be able to access. So, we are going to look at whether the navigation is intuitive, if the navigation is or whether or not it's using faceted navigation. Is it used? Is it needed? Is auto suggest used or needed? Is internal cross linking from content used appropriately? Does each page, subpage, category have a purpose? And does the site use breadcrumbs? All right, so let's jump in and take a look at these different aspects of navigation. All right, so let's take a look at our Bubba's Pampered Peddler site. And this is actually something that my father-in-law and I have discussed is whether or not our navigation is intuitive or not. So we've got this home, we've got Pampered Rides, and we've got Bubba's Designer Rides. And so one of the discussions that we've had is whether or not this Pampered Rides versus this Bubba's Designer Rides makes any sense to anybody that doesn't know who we are. And so we're actually in the process of really looking at this navigation to see, because we've heard from some folks that they've had trouble finding the right page on this site, and that's a good indication that your navigation is not set up properly. So, regardless of whether or not this ends up being the way we leave the navigation, it is something that's an internal discussion, in this little small business. And it's also something that we talk about quite a bit at Digital Marketer. What needs to be part of this main navigation? Is it intuitive? Do people know where to go to get what they're looking for? And one of the best ways to do this and to test this is to put, qualitative type feedback options on your site. You can use a tool like, it used to be called Qualaroo. Qualaroo is still what it's called. So Qualaroo is a good example of something where you can get, sort of voice of customer feedback from people about whether or not they've been able to find what they're looking for on your site. But any sort of qualitative feedback, you can see Qualaroo being employed right here. What are you hoping to get? You can ask just about anything and run polls and things like that. You can also use something like hotjar.com as a tool, which is a really versatile tool, can do a lot of different things for you to ask these kinds of questions, but also just listening to your customers and your customer support teams and stuff like that. They'll tell you if people are having problems. And then the last thing is just, consider it. Think about it longer than just a few moments as to whether or not you feel like your navigation is well represented, is representative of what, people would be looking for on this website. So the second thing is faceted navigation. Is it needed? Is it used? And is it, functioning properly? Neither one of these sites need faceted navigation, but if we go back to target.com, big old e-commerce site here, this is faceted navigation over here. This ability to run filters and run multiple filters at the same time. And this is all about the user experience and somebody being able to eventually find what they're looking for. In other words, search the site, find what they're looking for, and ultimately convert into a customer. And so large e-commerce sites, very, very large, even possibly content sites or publisher sites, should be thinking about, should we be employing faceted navigation? Is our faceted navigation functioning as expected? Is it intuitive? All right, so your internal search, in terms of your navigation, are you using auto suggest, and should you be? So you can say I start typing in the khaki again, and when we get khaki pants, boys khaki pants, and this auto suggest is very, very good for helping people along the journey of, again, they're on that bloodhound search. They're looking for a solution. They're looking for a product. They're looking for a service. The more you can do to help them stay on that scent, the better off they're going to be. And that comes back to your internal site search, your faceted search, your main navigation, whether or not we have a problem on this little website here, or whether or not we have a problem over here at Digital Marketer. We need to fix those problems as well. Now, what about internal navigation or internal cross-linking? So if we look at, for example, this Start Here page, about customer value optimization. This is just a blog post. And, you start with, things like categories. Like, this is internal cross-linking here. You want to go through and check, especially through your blog and content pages, and make sure whoever's running your blog is using proper internal cross-linking, so that linking to other things on your site wherever it makes sense, like here. Right, so we're linking across to a different offer here where it makes sense. All right, so we're linking to some more information about this term here. So you want to be checking through your content, and if you're seeing that, we don't use cross-linking very well from other pages. We don't cross-link inside of content to other pages. You're going to want to make a note of that and start to change that process and fix that process. And you see a number of cross links here inside of this content. So, are you using internal cross linking appropriately? Does each page, subpage, and category have a purpose? Again, this site here, the big question for us right now is whether or not we should collapse these two categories, main navigation points, because it doesn't make sense. Like, people don't know the difference between these designer rides and these pampered rides. Now, people that have done business with us know the difference, but people that have not, it just doesn't make any sense. And so that's the discussion that we're having, as to whether or not to collapse these two categories. Same here at Target, right? If we go in and we start trying to figure out, like, here's a category called clothing, and then there's a subcategory called boys clothing. Do all of these categories, are they intuitive? Do they make sense? Are people able to understand them? And the big thing here, one of the big things, is to make sure that you're not being cutesy with your category names and with your main navigation terms. You can see that, we're trying to be as clear as possible with these navigation terms. So what you might see is that this here, where, this is a very small business. We've got Bubba here who runs this business. A cutesy way to name this page or this category would be like Bubba's Corner, or Get Bubbatized, or something like that. And people will do that oftentimes with their navigation, thinking that, oh, this is cute, it's brandy, it's indicative of my brand. But what it really is it's confusing, and it causes problems. So you can see how intuitive everything is here on Target.com. So it's very intentional. All of the different names of categories and the names on everything in these faceted navigation, everything is as clear as it can possibly be to avoid any kind of confusion. So make sure that your pages, your subpages, your categories, they have a purpose, and that they are appropriately named. And then the last thing is, are you using breadcrumbs? Are you using breadcrumb navigation so that people know where they are inside of your site? So this is breadcrumb navigation here. You are here. You're basically one level deep on the schedule page. If we go into, for example, Bike Florida, let's see. We get into, okay, home, and then Bike Florida. And we can see where we are, and we can always navigate back a step or back 2 steps if we want to. So breadcrumb navigation makes it easy for the search engines to crawl your site from page to page and understand the relationship of, what's nested inside of what other categories and pages. And it's also a good thing for your users as well. All right, so check your navigation, spend some time, make sure that people are able to find what they're looking for, that everything's intuitive, nothing's unclear. You're using auto suggest if you need to. You're using faceted navigation if you need to. And if not, make those notes in your audit as something that you want to address. And with that, let's move on to accessibility.